In one day, Lisbon was devastated by an earthquake, a tsunami, and a fire. Hi, I'm Henry. Let's go to the year 1750 together. A city whose streets are covered with real gold, walls lined with golden plates, and this gold flowing in like a flood every day on ships crossing the ocean. What would the future of such a city be? Destruction? Victory? In 1750, Lisbon was unquestionably the richest capital in Europe. Diamonds arriving from Brazil were filling Portugal's treasuries. Gold merchants were lending money to kings, and cathedrals seemed to worship wealth rather than God. In Europe, Lisbon, with its immense riches, was like a new Rome. It appeared to be the axis of the world in the heart of Europe. And just when that heart was beating at its strongest, the world stopped it. Only 5 years later, in 1755, Lisbon would be wiped out by one of the most devastating earthquakes ever recorded in history. But the real question I want to ask you today is this: should we talk about the disaster itself, or about the new world that disaster helped create? Because the real story lies beneath the surface. Come with me. In the 1690s, in Brazil's Minas Gerais region, a shepherd noticed something shining in a riverbed. He picked it up and showed it to people around him, but no one understood what it was. Then a jeweler examined it, and his eyes lit up. Gold. And it wasn't just a small piece discovered by a shepherd. The reserves beneath Minas Gerais were larger than anything humanity had ever seen before. By the mid-1700s, Brazil alone was producing nearly twice as much gold as all of Europe's previously known sources combined. So where was this gold going? To Lisbon, all of it. And from Lisbon? That's where things become even more interesting. Portugal didn't have the capacity to hold on to this enormous wealth. Why? Because Portugal had no industry, no textile production, no real manufacturing power. Gold from Brazil arrived in Lisbon. The royal court took some, the church took some, and the rest quickly moved on to Europe, to England, the Netherlands, and France. Lisbon's heart was beating, but its lifeblood was feeding other bodies. An economist of the time noticed this and said, "Portugal holds not the gold itself, but the shadow of the gold." Let me ask you something. How many countries in the world today produce resources but cannot keep the wealth they generate? Think about it. By 1750, a system had emerged, extremely efficient, but complex and ruthless. Imagine a chain: Portuguese ships in the South Atlantic, English and Dutch banks in Northern Europe, slave traders along the coasts of Africa. Most of the workers in Brazil's mines were enslaved Africans brought there by force, and the wheel kept turning. Historians call this the Atlantic economy. But let me tell you something. It was also the world's first truly global supply chain. The King of Portugal looked at this machine with admiration. His palace was rising higher. His cathedrals were growing larger. He commissioned the famous Mafra Palace. To build it required 40,000 workers, 18 years, and tons of Brazilian gold. But the message was clear. Look at us. God has chosen us. In the 1750s, the city was growing so rapidly that infrastructure couldn't keep up. Buildings rose on top of one another, and construction regulations were almost non-existent. And beneath that ground lay another reality. Historians say the 1755 earthquake was geologically inevitable, but the scale of its destruction might not have been. Despite all the gold flowing through Lisbon, most ordinary people still lived in wooden and clay houses. Gold kept palaces standing, not homes. Now we wake up on the morning of November 1st, 1755. All Saints' Day. In Lisbon, this day is sacred. Everyone is heading to church. Bells echo through the city. Incense smoke fills the air. Priests recite prayers. The streets are nearly empty because people are gathered in places of worship. 9:40 a.m. First, a strange sound rises from beneath the ground. A rumbling, growling noise, something primal that no one can understand. People look at one another. What is that sound? Then suddenly the earth shakes so violently that this is no ordinary tremor. Historians and geologists estimate the earthquake's magnitude between 8.5 and 9. One of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded in human history. The shaking lasts 3.5 minutes. 3.5 minutes. It sounds short, doesn't it? But place your hand on a table and imagine that table trying to throw you off for 3.5 minutes. Walls cracking, ceilings collapsing, the ground beneath your feet moving like waves. Churches collapse with dozens of people inside them. That morning, many of those who died were the ones who had gone to worship for All Saints' Day. One of history's cruelest ironies. They faced the greatest disaster at the very moment they believed themselves closest to God. And the nightmare does not end. 2 massive aftershocks strike. Most buildings are already damaged. People run into the streets. Those who have nowhere left to escape are caught by the aftershocks. But the worst is still coming. As survivors flee through the ruins, something strange happens along Lisbon's shoreline. The sea begins to retreat, far beyond normal. The harbor floor becomes visible, then the sea comes back. A massive wave, a tsunami. 3 enormous waves strike the city. The first is the strongest. It sweeps away everything along the coast. But the disaster still isn't over. Fires begin to spread across the city. Ovens overturned by the earthquake. Candles knocked over. Lisbon's strong winds feeding the flames. For 3 days, the fires burn uncontrollably, destroying what the earthquake spared. Earthquake, tsunami, fire. Lisbon falls in 3 blows. In the end, 85% of the city is gone. 12,000 homes destroyed. Only 20 of 200 churches remain standing. The Royal Library of 70,000 volumes is burned. Historians still cannot determine the exact number of dead. The most cautious estimates range from 30,000 to 40,000. The king had been outside the city that day and survived. And in that moment of crisis, one name rose above the rest. Sebastião José de Carvalho y Melo, the man who would later be known as the Marquis of Pombal. The king asked him, "What should we do?" Pombal's answer was short, cold, and unforgettable. Bury the dead. Feed the living. Rebuild the city. 3 sentences, a program, the manifesto of the first modern disaster management. Then he summoned 2 architects and gave them a single task. Rebuild Lisbon, but this time build it correctly. What emerged was not just a city, it was an idea. Wide, straight streets, buildings of standardized height, and most revolutionary of all, structures with internal wooden frames designed to flex and resist earthquakes. This system is still known today as Pombaline architecture. But what about the gold? What about the Great Atlantic Machine? It continued, but never quite the same. And here lies the great irony. Pombal financed all these Enlightenment reforms, this modern state, through the same colonial system built on slave labor. So let me ask you a question. Can a man be both a hero and a villain at the same time? This is one of the paradoxes of capitalism. From Lisbon's ruins emerged the modern state. Every great disaster generates a new project. If you're curious about how great disasters have shaped the modern world, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.